Hey everybody, Steve here, and I'm here in Merced, California, which is in Central California. I'm exiting here on Childs Avenue, and I'm heading to a cemetery to visit someone who I mentioned last week when I was visiting another gravesite. Okay, I got way turned around. It turns out instead of making a right-hand turn on Childs, which I did, I was supposed to make a left-hand turn, but the reason I didn't make a left-hand turn is it looked like that was the entrance to the freeway. It's kind of confusing right here at this intersection. It's just, as soon as you get off the freeway, there's all kinds of things going on here. See what I mean? It looks like this way is to the freeway. But the map says, oh, okay, it goes over the freeway. I see. I thought it was the freeway entrance and off-ramp, and maybe it is, but it's also the overpass. Now I should run into B Street, and then I'll make a right-hand turn on B Street, and the cemetery should just be down the road from the Childs. This looks like a very industrial area over here. But all those green trees there on the right-hand side up ahead, that's probably the cemetery there. I've never been here to Merced, so, and now that I got lost, I've been driving around, and there are all kinds of different areas. Some really nice new areas, some older areas, industrial areas like this. Okay, so keep my eye peeled for B Street. Oh, okay, there, I see a cemetery. Is that it? Oh, that's right, it says make a right on B Street and go down a little ways. Okay, B Street. Looks like some new construction here across the street. Okay, interesting. Wow. These roads are pretty rough. Is this the entrance here? Merced District and Calvary Cemetery. It's a tiny little sign. Garden of Angels. Did I come in too soon? I may have come in a little too soon. Okay, that big white mausoleum that you see straight ahead, I think it's just to the right of that. And the reason I know is because before coming here yesterday, I Googled to see if anyone had visited Steven Stayner's gravesite. And sure enough, Lamont at large visited, I think, maybe 6 months to a year ago. And he didn't pan around or give any indication of where Steven is buried, other than he just walked to his gravesite. So we'll see if I can find it. There's no GPS. The Find a Grave Memorial page didn't have a GPS. And Lamont didn't say where it was. He didn't drive around the cemetery. He just walked down this street right here. He was up here walking, and then once he got close to the grave, he just stopped showing himself walking, and then the next thing you know, he's at the grave. So I'm pretty sure it's right in here, though. I've been looking around now for about an hour, and I haven't been able to find his gravesite. So I'm going to drive around a little bit and see if I can find it this way. It does say that he's laid to rest in the Garden of Peace, but none of the sections are labeled, so I have no idea what any section is, at least in this old section where I've been. So I'm going to drive over here. It looks like there might be a little bit of a newer section, and I'll see if maybe they're labeled. Maybe the sections are marked. But in these older sections, I haven't seen any so far that have been marked. Now there is an office, but it's not open. It's Sunday. I may have to wait and come back tomorrow. I'll call them first and see if they can tell me how to find his gravesite. Well, I was really beginning to think I wasn't going to be able to find Steven Stayner's gravesite today. I have been here for a couple of hours searching everywhere. It's really hot and muggy and very smoky. Not a great day to be walking around looking for grave sites. His Find a Grave Memorial page didn't have a GPS, so I didn't know where it was here in the cemetery. And when I first drove into the cemetery, I didn't realize just how large the cemetery is. Unfortunately, Lamont did not show how to find his gravesite. He showed the gravesite, he stood at the gravesite and talked, but he didn't pan around or show how he got here. And in fact, as he was talking about Stephen's life, he was walking down in the historic section, a really beautiful area, but it's not even close to where Stephen is laid to rest. So I've been looking over there for the past hour or so, and then I looked again at his Find a Grave memorial page, and it said that he was laid to rest in the Garden of Peace. Well, there is no Garden of Peace that I could find, but there was a Garden of Peace, and it looked like it said Veterans Annex. And that turned out to be this section here, and I thought, well, let me at least look. And the one thing I did see on Lamont's channel was that the gravesite, just to the right of the gravesite, was some kind of a curb, cement curb, but that's all I had to go by. So I thought, well, since this is possibly the right section, since it had a sign, and there's only there are two areas here that have curbs, so I parked right here in the shade. I mean, this is a really beautiful area. And then I thought, well, this has a curb, although it didn't look the way it looked in the video. And I walked right over here, and Stephen's gravesite is right here on the corner. Could not be easier to find, now that I know where it is. He's laid to rest right here next to Jesse Stayner, which says, beloved father, brother, uncle, and friend. He died in 1990. I'll have to look and see who that is. I don't know if that's his uncle or maybe his father. So I'm going to add a GPS right now to his gravesite. Someone's been here and left some purple flowers. And I'll pan around so you can see what the section looks like. And right behind me here, I don't know if you can see the cars, or if you can probably hear the cars going by. That's Highway 99. That's the highway that you take from Los Angeles all the way up to Sacramento. And it kind of goes through all the towns, where if you take the other highway that's parallel, the 5 freeway, or Highway 5, that one doesn't really go through the towns. It's more of a direct freeway, a little bit faster, but this is more scenic. And all of the towns and cemeteries are right off of this Highway 99. So I just added a GPS to Stephen's gravesite on his Find a Grave memorial page. And the other thing that did help a little bit in Lamont's video was he was standing toward the end of the video. He was standing right here, and I could see actually he was on the other side of this, I don't know what this is, this gray structure, and with this pole. When he was here, I don't think the ivy was on the pole, but I could see that. So that's actually what brought me back to this section. I thought, well, you know, that is in his video, so I didn't know if he was near Stephen's grave. He didn't, you know, say where he was or show the grave from this gray water tower or whatever it is. But I thought, well, at least that is in his video, so he was standing back here at some point. So that's a train. I always love cemeteries that have trains running near them. I don't know why, I love the sound of train engines with the train horns blowing and the trains going by. A lot of trains here in the Central Valley here, Central California. And if you don't know his story, it's a really bizarre one with lots of weird twists and turns. And if someone told you this story, I mean, if someone tried to sell this story as a fictional book or a movie, I don't think anyone would actually publish it or film it, because it just seems so hard to believe that this could happen to this family and these two brothers. It just seems so hard to believe that what happened to Stephen could have happened to him, and that he also had a brother who had more of a bizarre story than he did. So if you're not familiar with the story, when Stephen was 7 years old, he was kidnapped. I believe he was walking home from school, and he was abducted by a child molester and all-around bad guy in so many different ways, Kenneth Parnell. And to make matters even worse, Parnell was able to get someone to help him. His accomplice was Irvin Edward Murphy. In my opinion, Parnell was deeply, deeply disturbed and mentally ill, and he basically just brainwashed Stephen, telling him that his parents no longer wanted him, could no longer afford to keep him, and they had given legal custody to Parnell to take care of him, so Parnell was now his new dad. And I guess if you're 7 years old and you think your parents don't want you anymore and they've given you up, And the story continues to get even weirder, I think, even stranger. Parnell was just sort of like, he flaunted the situation in everyone's face, didn't even really try to hide. He enrolled Steven in school, changed his name, enrolled him in school, and just pretended to be his dad. And Steven was so young, he didn't even really remember his last name. He just knew his first name was Steven, but Parnell had him change his name, and no one seemed to be the wiser. He gave Steven lots of freedom, so he wasn't really like locked in a basement or anything. He was just convinced that his parents no longer wanted him, and he was now living with Parnell. So Parnell was kind of emboldened by this. So around 7 years later, when Steven was around 14 years old, was going through puberty, was no longer of any interest to Parnell sexually, so Parnell decided to do the whole thing again with a new boy. And so he found another accomplice to help him. The next person helped him abduct Timothy White, whose gravesite I visited last week. And I talked a little bit about Steven. I didn't tell you the whole story because I was focused mostly on Timothy White's story. So if you're interested in knowing what happened to White, I'll put a link down below in the description section so you can watch that video. So what happened essentially is that Parnell did the same thing. He got an accomplice. They kidnapped another boy right out of his front yard apparently. And he was only, I think, 4 years old. It was either 4 or 5 years old. Oh, and I almost forgot one of the most important parts. Parnell had actually tried to get Steven to be his accomplice, to help him lure another boy into their home. And Steven didn't want any part of it, but somehow Parnell was able to convince one of Steven's school buddies to help him do it. I don't know if he paid him or how he convinced him, but again, you know, another willing accomplice. Well, after Timothy arrived, Steven, I guess now he was much older and wiser and realized what was going on. And Timothy had just been there less than 2 weeks when Steven decided to finally run away from Parnell. He waited till he went to work. I think he worked in the night shift. And he took Timmy and they hitchhiked to the local police station. They didn't know where else to go. And at first, he wouldn't admit any sexual abuse. You know, he explained the story and everything, but he just, you know, out of embarrassment, I'm sure, a 14-year-old boy didn't want to admit what had happened to him repeatedly for years at the hands of this sexual monster, this child abuser. Unfortunately, because of that, they were able to arrest Parnell, but when he went to trial, because it was just, I guess, a simple kidnapping case, but it happened twice. I don't have the exact information in front of me, but it was something ridiculous. Like he got 5 years for kidnapping, and then he got off on good behavior after 2 years. So it was something just completely ridiculous. I mean, how do you kidnap a child and hold him hostage for 7 years, even if there was no sexual abuse? And then you only get a couple of years in prison. Things fall through the cracks, unfortunately, sometimes. Fortunately, after Parnell got out of jail, he decided to do it again, a third time. Well, in California, we have a 3 strikes you're out law. And so this time when he went to trial, even though he hadn't actually kidnapped someone, he had paid a woman to kidnap or to abduct a very young child. So basically he was buying a young child. This time he decided instead of kidnapping, I think he was older and having a lot of physical issues and a lot of health issues, so it was just easier just to buy a kid. Well then I guess there are lots of people who are willing to help you do that as well. So just totally insane, this whole story. But this time at least, when he went to trial, he did get sent to prison. I believe it was for life. Of course, by this time he was already very old and didn't have much time. He was already sick and not doing so well health-wise, but he did spend the rest of his life in jail and died in jail. Now, sadly, Steven, as anyone would imagine, was pretty traumatized, and this whole situation, I mean, who knows how he would have been if this hadn't have happened, but it certainly couldn't have helped any. And even though he was returned home to his parents, he was never really himself again and acted out a lot and was basically traumatized and wasn't able to live a normal life for all kinds of reasons. He rode a motorcycle, and one night after leaving work and driving home, he was in a fatal motorcycle accident and died. And this was back in 1989. But the story doesn't end there. So it turns out that Steven's older brother, Cary Stayner, a decade after Steven died, in 1999, murdered 4 women in Yosemite. He worked at a popular Yosemite lodge, and brutally murdered 4 different women. And I'll tell his story in a different video, but I'll do that sometime in the future. Cary is, I believe he's on death row, but in California we don't really have the death penalty, so everyone just dies of old age after they've committed these horrendous crimes. Now, what are the odds of that happening in one family? I mean, a gazillion to 1. I mean, I'm guessing this is probably the only time that's ever happened. I mean, if anyone watching knows of a family where someone's been abducted and then returned, and then their older brother turns out to be a serial killer, I can't imagine that that's ever happened more than this one time. So the next time you're driving down Highway 99 in Merced, if you don't have time to stop, just look over to the right if you're heading down toward LA, and know that Steven Stayner appears to be finally at peace. So definitely a big thank you to the volunteers at Find a Grave for all of the helpful information that made it possible for me to find Steven Stayner's gravesite, and also to Lamont for showing me this curb next to Steven's gravesite, which gave me a clue, and for showing me the gray tower, water tower, whatever that is, which also gave me another clue. So without those helpful hints, I'm not sure I would have been able to find his gravesite today. I also need to find a hotel. I wasn't sure where I would be stopping tonight, where I would be staying, so I'm going to stay here because it is getting late. So now I've got to go find a hotel room, and so I'm just going to drive around a little bit. I've got my Hotwire app and my Travelocity app, so I'm sure I'll find something, and I'll probably also show you my hotel room. When I travel and spend the night away from home, which is rare, especially these past couple of years, I like to show you where I'm staying. I always like that when I'm watching videos. I always love seeing where YouTubers are spending the night, what hotels where they stay. So for those of you who are interested, keep watching. As you know, if you've watched my videos in the past, I normally stay when I'm traveling at Motel 6s, and one of the reasons is that I like to be on the ground floor, and I like to be able to park right in front of my room because I have so many bags and items to bring in. Now, Motel 6s are, affordable. They're usually around $60, $70, but this hotel was only $89, so not much more. And you get a refrigerator and a microwave and lots of other things. I never watch the TV because I never have enough time. The freeway is right there, as you can see the cars going by probably, but this room is really set back, where a lot of times some of the Motel 6s and where I stay, the room is just practically right on top of the freeway. So with the fan on, the AC, I can't even hear the freeway. So that's nice. So this looks very comfortable, very nice. Have any of you stayed here? This week I want to thank my newest PayPal and Patreon supporters, Jill Milligan, the Foxy Bee, John Whitlock, and Dana Pretzer. Thank you so much, Jill, Foxy Bee, John, and Dana, for your extra generous donations to my channel this week. They are very appreciated and definitely help make future trips like this possible. I also want to give a shout out and a very big thank you to all of my new subscribers this past week as well. Until our next trip to the cemetery together, thanks for sharing the memories, everybody.